So some of you might remember from last year that right around this time we did a Soul Center program as well to commemorate, to take a pause and really think about Sephardi, Mizrahi, Jewish history. We do it specifically around this time because on November 29th, there is a significance to understanding the departure and the expulsion of Jews from Muslim countries. We have two amazing guests here that are here to share not just a history, but a memory, to share with you guys a slice of information from what they've experienced over their lifetime. Just to refresh our memories a little bit. On 29th of November 1947, the UN General Assembly voted on the partition plan and adopted by 33 votes to 13 with 10 abstentions. This Jewish side accepted the UN plan for the establishment of two states. The Arabs rejected it and launched a war of annihilation against the Jewish state. Simply put, Israel's independence was a catalyst that ricocheted where Jews around the world who were living in Arab Muslim countries, some of them for centuries, were now in hostile situations. In the 20th century, approximately 900,000 Jews migrated, fled, or were expelled from Muslim-majority countries throughout Africa and Asia, primarily a consequence of the Israeli Declaration of Independence. The mass movement mainly transpired from 1948 to the early 1970s, with one final exodus of Iranian Jews occurring shortly after the Islamic Revolution in 1979-1980. Just to give you a perspective, as of 1948, this was the population of Jews in North Africa, in the Middle East, and in non-Arab countries. By the time you get to 1972, you're talking about less than 50,000 Jews living in any one of those given countries that had hundreds of thousands of Jews. And by the time you get to the present day and age, zero or close to it is what we're left with. This happened very, very, very quickly. The map of the world of what Jewry looked like in 1948, 1972, and as of 2023. At the moment, we're looking at 3,600 Jews. Maybe this is a more conservative number. Maybe there are a few more. I don't know if Iranian Jews, I don't know how they count them that are living in Iran at the moment. But this is the history. Certainly a huge shift has happened in history. We focus on the land of Israel and what it means to us, but we forget about the tragedy that happened around it, around the creation of the land of Israel and what it meant for these people who very much identified with the countries that they came from and the history and the cultures that they came from. So this morning, I would like to introduce you to your first speaker, Mr. Behrooz Hakimian. When you walked in, you probably saw this is just an exhibit, one of the many things that Mr. Behrooz Hakimian, who's very passionate about the history of Iranian Jews and Mashadi Jews specifically. You're going to get a chance to learn about their history and learn what is their community like, what it was and what it is today. And then we are going to have the honor of introducing to you as well Rabbi Eli Abadi, which I will get up and speak to you a little bit more about who he is and why you had the pleasure of hearing from him today. So without further ado, Mr. Hakimian, please come along. Click this and it'll go through the slides that you gave me, okay? Good. Is this on?
I think it's on.
It's on now.
Okay. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi Abadi, Rabbi Albo, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here on behalf of the Mashadi Heritage Committee. I get very excited. I love sleeping, but last night, believe it or not, for 2 hours I was up, out of the excitement, because even if I talk to an audience, and it's an impressive audience, of 4 or 5 people, I always get very excited, and sometimes I forget things, sometimes I go back to it. That's why I made notes. And I know I have limited time, which is correct. And I just want to mention to you, and I encourage you to, after a few minutes, if you have questions, you can raise your hand, stop me, because interacting is very important. Furthermore, I encourage you to pay attention to those, read the captions. It's a fascinating story of how people dealt with adverse situation without being violent and without being resentful. Basically, history of Jews in Iran goes back to about 2,700 years ago, from the time of Assyrians, and I'm going to go through it pretty fast, again, as time is limited. Then you may know about the Babylonian exile, destruction of the first temple, and the Jews were moved to Babylon. And ultimately, when Cyrus conquered Babylon, Cyrus the Great, he gave freedom of religion to the Jews, to all the minorities, according to legal documents, to the tablets they found. In there, he gave religious freedom to all the minorities. But according to biblical records and things that are mentioned, and Rabbi Abadi is much better qualified than me to make comments about those people Jews were given freedom. The temple was rebuilt again with the help of Ezra and all that. In the Persian history, they talk about Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra was a scribe in the Persian court king, and Nehemiah was a cupbearer, to what I have read in terms of the history of the Jews. So Jews had an important position. Also, the Persian Empire was very big. So Jews, you would see Jews in, if you can imagine the geography of the region, scattered throughout eastern part of Iran, Khorasan province, near Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, even Turkmenistan. Then you would see Jews in southern Iran, Kerman, Zahedan. Then you see Jews in Khuzestan, which is next to, very close to Iraq. You see Jews in northwest Iran, central Iran. So they were all over Iran. And they had a interesting life and they had a lot of issues. You know, you have read the story of Esther and Mordechai, things that they had to go through. And it was a challenging life. The biggest challenge came after the Arab invasion of Iran. Arab/Islamic invasion of Iran, which was in 642 in Nahawand. Basically, everybody, doesn't matter, most of the Iranians, almost all of them were Zoroastrians or of people of other religion. And they were forced to convert or be killed. And many of them did, and many in secret, they kind of like managed to survive and all that. But this went on, and it was not a good life for them, for the most part. At best, what they called Jews the Himis, and they would give them many rights, but they say that you have to pay high taxes, higher taxes than the other ones. You could not live in homes that were above the non-Jewish homes. For example, I know in Iran, in ancient Iran, you could not ride on a horse or on a donkey in presence of other Muslims. In other words, if you walked in the street, your head could not be above a Muslim person's head. And a lot of times, they had to wear shoes, 2 different color shoes that were recognizable, in other words, make them recognizable as Jews. Or the patch that came to being used for identifying as Jews, from the records that I have read, and I could be wrong, but by and large I've read quite a bit about this, the patch, the Jewish patch, or the Star of David patch that they put during the Second War, was initiated by the Safavid dynasty in Iran. I think it was Shah Ismail or his predecessor, that you had to wear that to be identified. You could not use the bathhouses that the Muslims use. You could not touch the fruits in the marketplaces. If you went to a Muslim's bazaar or a shop, and if you had tea, even in glass cups, they would wash those separately because you were considered a Jew. You were considered untouchable. That was their life. By many accounts, many Jews, in many communities, we know, like, for example, Jews lived in Oromia. You've heard of Oromia? That's in Iran, basically. Most of the Oromia is in Iran. And in fact, the western part of Azerbaijan is referred to as Oromia. And by many accounts, many Jewish communities were forced to convert. And they did. And they kind of like vanish over time. And now it comes to the story that we convey through this exhibit in here, or to the display, is the story of Mashadi Jews. In early 1800s, Nader Shah, king of Iran, as I mentioned previously to the audience we had, went to India and he conquered India. If you read about Nader Shah, he was one of the very famous warriors of 18th century Iran, and he kind of like, he put all the areas that were dividing each other from the main body of the Iranian geography, he put them all together, forced them to be as part of Iran. And he had a lot of treasures. I'm making kind of like brief story. And ultimately, he decided to bring his capital to the city of Mashhad. Now, city of Mashhad was a very religious Muslim city. Imam Reza, the sixth Imam of the Muslim religion, Shia Muslims, was buried in there. And in fact, Mashhad means Mahal Sha'adat, means place of martyrdom. So Nader Shah decided to create that as his capital. As I mentioned, the story goes that one day he was walking incognito in a bazaar and he hears two men are arguing with each other. He says, no, it's mine, no, it's yours, no, it's mine. And then he finds out, he asks what's going on. And then they tell him that somebody had found a treasure of coins in a wall of a house, which was not unusual. And we want to, he's saying, no, it's yours, I bought the house from you. He said, no, I sold you the house, it's not mine, it's yours. Anyway, he chose to move, he ordered to move 40 Mashadi families that were living in Qazvin, they were not Mashadi then, into the city of Mashhad, and to maintain and to protect his treasury. And as they moved to Mashhad, within 2 years, Nader Shah was killed. And living now Mashhadis that had moved to Mashhad in a very religious, fervent Shia community, Muslim community, they were under a lot of pressure. They were living as street beggars or as street vendors. They had a rough life. And ultimately, within many years, they really suffered a lot. They had a very harsh life. And it comes in 1839, about 100 years after the incident with Nader Shah. There's a blood libel, which is very typical, as you see many blood libels within the Jewish communities across the world. And the Muslim mobs attack, and they killed 30 Jews. And at that time, the community in 1839, Mashadis were maybe 1,500. So you imagine if 30 Jews are killed, or 30 members of the community, and they also, sorry to bring it up, they also took 3 young girls away from them. I think they were 8 or 9 years old, to marry them, Mashadi Jewish girls. And they say either forced to either convert to Islam or we'll kill you. So the community, in order to save themselves, they decided to outwardly, and I'm quoting outwardly, embrace Islam, but secretly, throughout the years, officially for 86 years, until 1925, they practiced Islam but secretly every single one that we know of maintained Judaism. There are many of them that went to Hajj, holy city of Mecca, and only successful Muslim people would go to Mecca. But these were Jews, and on many occasions it is recorded history, stories are written, that they would keep tefillins in their turbans. And if you see the list, check that list, it's on the wall. Okay, you see 1839 to 1825, and it seems the Mashhad. That's really the official time. But this issue continued until 1946. The captions, by the way, are all there. This is the oldest document that was found that talked about the story of what happened to the Mashadis. That is present, I think it is at the museum in Jerusalem. Tribute to Mashadi woman, by many accounts. If it wasn't for the Mashadi woman that kept kosher at home and kept Judaism at home, because the men outwardly would put turban on and they would go to Hajj, to Makkah, and they go to mosque, they say prayers. So if it wasn't for them, the soul of the house would have been lost. And the tribute is given to the Mashadi woman. Going down, Rabbi, or up? Okay. This is a record of a number of books that are written by different scholars, international scholars, about the Mashadi history, referring specifically to what happened and all that. Now, the interesting part about Mashadi history is that there are many other Jewish communities that were forced to convert, and they did. But the Mashadi community as a whole, they maintained their religion, and they came in mass. Hardly any of them left Judaism as we know it. This is a timeline of Mashadi Jews. I think you'll find it right there if you're interested in reading it. And the history of crypto Jews of Mashhad. Now, we found 13 sets of ketubas, and these are, as you can see, there's a Muslim version, and there's a Jewish version, Hebrew version. So Hebrew version was done in secret. The Muslim version until 1906 was done openly. So they were very cautious about this. They would hide the Jewish one, and because they were well off, the families that were well off would make these ketubas. See, there are 4 sets that we are displaying in here. 1851, the previous one was 1853, 1851, 1858, and 1893. This is the list of the Mashadi men who went to Karbala, who went also to Hajj. Now, Hajj, according to Islam religion, is a place that you are obligated to go. You don't have to go if you are doing financially well. Now, why Mashadi, so many of them went there? Because after they became outwardly Muslim, and of course secretly Jews, they used to be very successful merchants. They happened to be on the eastern part of Iran, which was close to the Silk Road, and they continued on. This is the last person that made pilgrimage to Mecca. Haji, his sons are still, one of his sons is still living. He's close to 95 years old. This shows Mashadi man. You see the middle one, the center one is a Haji. His caption is there. He went to Hajj. And you can also see these are all descendants of Mashadi people right now. The names are identified back there. You can see it. Haji Nabi, very famous. His children, his grandkids are also known within the community. Haji, you see, in Muslim garbs again. This Haji Adonia Kohan, He, from Makkah, he went to Jerusalem, in Shekhinat Bukharim. He made a synagogue that's magnificent with Jerusalem stone. It still is active. Rabbi, you may have seen it. And also there's 2 synagogues that the Mashadi is building in Jerusalem in the early 1900s. This is the entrance to his synagogue. This is one last story I will tell you, and that is the person you see sitting there, the oldest one with the turban, white turban. His name is Sheikh Yaqub Khafi. Sheikh means a Muslim scholar, person that is knowledgeable about Islam. And the story is one day told by a man that lived in Italy, Mashadi man. He passed away many years ago. That he was chosen as one of those kids that would be watching the neighborhood, because Mashadi used to go in the basements and say minyan, make minyans and all that in Mashhad in the old time, that's going back to late 1800s. And this boy is standing outside and watching over who's coming and who's not coming. And one day he sees him coming, and obviously he's in a Muslim garb. He looks like he has a beard. It's very much a Muslim-looking man. And he says, "How can I help you? What do you want?" He kind of like pushes him aside, and he says, "Go." And he sees him going in a basement, taking his turban out and everything else, and he starts saying prayer. He puts a kippah on and he starts saying prayer. This is a famous story. It took us about 20 years to find this picture. Recently, we just found it. Another one, Haji Eskel. He also built another synagogue. You can see it next to the Haji Adonia synagogue in Jerusalem. Again, I encourage you to see and read the captions, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Somebody have a question or two, maybe? If they want, they can come up to that microphone. Be sure it's on.
I wanted to ask, where are you from in the Middle East?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Where are you from in the Middle East?
I'm from Mashhad. I was born in Mashhad.
Okay.
I'm 81 years old. I was born in Mashhad. I lived in Mashhad until I was 6 years old. Then I lived in Israel for 1 year. I lived in Pakistan for 2 years. And then I came to the United States to study when I was 20 years old.
Thank you. Can you go back to the chart where you showed like how many Jews live present day? Can you go back to the chart where it showed like how many Jews live present day and back then? Wait. Yeah.
You mean in Iran?
Yeah, so why are there more Jews when it was like the 1948s and the 1972s than now, even though it was a lot more, just a lot more, not as like accepting it now? Were they not able to leave, or why were there more then than now?
I cannot hear. I'm sorry.
So why were they more then than now? Like, why were there more Jews then instead of now?
Why? Because of the condition, because of the situations that they had. For example, if you were, I told a story before, I'm going to tell you one. In Iran, when 1925 came, when the Pahlavi dynasty came, this in modern times, and they secularized Iran, basically, officially, okay? And they gave freedom to the Jews. They gave all the things that the Jews had unofficial positions, even in high position, including many people that I know, my brother's friends. They were highly educated in the United States and all that. And when Khomeini came, all of that stopped. The extremism. So a lot of Jews started fleeing Iran. They ran away from Iran or many other countries. I recall myself, I was in Iran for business. After the revolution, I had a passport. I could go. I didn't have any problem with the government. I saw pictures of Khomeini and Yasser Arafat, which was a known, I'm not talking about because he was the enemy of Israel. Yasser Arafat was a known enemy of Iran. During the Iran-Iraq war, he never supported the Iranians. Yet, Yasser Arafat's picture was next to Khomeini's picture in every setting that I saw.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sure.
My question is, were the Jews ever caught? You know, like, were there, so when they all fake converted, was there ever a time when, let's say, they were all praying in a minyan, and then, like, a bunch of people came and were like, oh, you there, like, you're being Jewish?
No, but there was one blood libel that happened in 1946, and one child was actually kidnapped, and they accused the Jews, which was not true. And that caused basically, because they tried to attack Jews, the Jewish neighborhood, luckily nobody was killed. But the Imam Juma of the time, the main religious leader, saved the Jews because of experience that he had with them, with their integrity and honesty, and he stopped it. But that issue of hatred in the extremist group will always continue, and that's what caused a lot of, by and large, people of Iran, as I say, my culture or background, they are not against Jews, by and large, but the extremists are.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.